to the Thursday Night Live here on Inside Texas. After 3 weeks or 2 weeks of unsuccessful attempts, Pack and I are back to get into some concepts. I promised you 2 weeks ago this show that we're doing tonight. A little bit of under the center offense. There was such a long time where people were just gun heavy, gun obsessed. Everybody ran everything out of gun. And you're seeing it at the high level. These pro style offenses, in the NFL and some at the collegiate level are having a lot of success. So Pack and I will get into that. We'll talk about some of the struggles here in 2025 and how Texas wasn't able to run the ball the way that we all wish they had. But first, Pack, how you doing, brother?
I'm good. How are you?
Hey, doing good, man. Pack, busy man, getting quizzes in, getting some IT time in. So we're grateful that Pack can spend a few minutes or an hour rather here with us. Real quick, guys, hop on over to Inside Texas and come join the community, man. $1. Still got a hot deal for you. $1 and it'll get you in and you can come hang out. Well, it's going to be a long off season. Make it a little bit shorter, spending it over on Inside Texas. All right, Pack, no big secret, brother. Couldn't run the football to save our lives last year. A&M's made us look a little bit better in the run game each of the last 2 years. Could say the same for Oklahoma. But even then, in those games, it took Texas kind of wearing down an Oklahoma team for maybe 2.5, 3 quarters before the run game really started to show. I guess the year before last, it was really late in that second quarter when OU just kept giving us the football. When you saw Trey Wisner get loose a couple of times. In your eyes, man, in your expert eyes, what were some of the major reasons that Texas wasn't able to run the football and then run, let's bring up some of the key concepts and what they were trying to do that obviously a lot of times were unsuccessful.
Yeah, so I'll start off with the key concepts because what you see a lot in college, and this is pretty consistent throughout colleges, teams tend to major in one type of run, right? So a lot of spread teams are almost exclusively inside zone. And then every once in a while, as their change up, they'll run power or they'll run insert as their gap scheme stuff. A team that comes to mind when you think of this is Ole Miss. If you watched them last year under Lane Kiffin, a lot of what they did was inside zone. They'd occasionally run duo, and then every once in a while with Daquan Wright, they would insert him into B gap as a lead blocker for Kewan Lacey. So there's a lot of those denominations where there's certain teams that if they're going to play a lot of 12 personnel, they're going to run a little bit more duo. They might run a little bit more of the OT counter stuff. Other teams will run, when they're under center, they'll run a lot of outside zone. And then there's like some hybrids in there. But for the large part, teams tend to major in one thing. Texas did not do that last year. Texas ran pretty much everything. They ran duo, they ran inside zone, they ran outside zone, they ran counter, they ran power. You can even find a couple snaps of them running veer. They ran some, I'm pretty sure they also ran some trap in there at some point. So they were really, really diverse in the run game. And to some degree, that's a good thing. Like, you do want to have some diversity in your run game, but at the same time, there is such a thing as when you do so many things, you're probably not going to be great at any of them, given you just don't have a ton of time to practice and injuries start to wear on you, and those can all create problems. So it's kind of a give and take there. So that was one of the reasons why Texas struggled. Obviously, a lack of push on the interior was another reason, just being really poor from a technical perspective. But I don't think that's the only reason, honestly, especially when you look at some of the struggles with outside zone. I've long held the belief that, and this gets into our topic for tonight, I think to run outside zone, you need to be under center. So the reason why you need to be under center when you run outside zone is when you're playing shotgun, right? One of the two things that a lot of college offenses want to do is they want to run RPOs, and off the RPOs, they want to be able to do some things with their quarterback in terms of like doing boot action, naked, stuff like that. So part of the problem is when you run shotgun or when you run pistol and you're running outside zone and you're reading that backside edge, right? The edge away from where the run is going. If you're an edge and you're seeing outside zone and then you're pistol, you're able to get upfield a little bit further, right? You can take 1 or 2 steps up the line of scrimmage, get into the backfield because there's more depth there, right? Like if a quarterback scrambles, you're not going to be in bad position if you work 1 or 2 yards up the field. Whereas when you're under center and everything's working away from you, if you get 2 to 3 yards up the field, now you've got no chance to cut the play off because the ball moves a lot faster in that direction. Whereas in pistol, one, the back has to set his feet and then the path has to get declared for him. So you're able to trace back on the ball carrier. It gives the edge an ability to play a little bit more aggressively versus outside zone. And this is why you saw last year a lot of times edges would be able to cut the play off from the backside. Like they would chase someone down. They would chase Trey Wisner or CJ Baxter or name a running back, and you probably saw it at least once a game. So when you're under center, that edge has to play a lot slower because if you were to do that same thing where you're working upfield immediately off the boot action, that you're now in a really bad angle. So you're in a really bad angle for the boot action because of the way that the quarterback's footwork works, right? You're stepping towards the handoff, you're turning and you're sprinting in the opposite direction. That's a lot of conflict to put on an edge who's working up 2 to 3 yards up the field. And then not as easily able to make plays on the ball carrier if they're going to get so deep into the backfield. So one, I think under center, just from a base concept, from a leverage standpoint, I think it makes outside zone a lot easier to run. And I think this is why almost universally in the NFL, if you look at the Rams, if you look at the Bears or the Lions last year, if you look at the Dolphins, if you look at any one of these McVay tree teams, if you look at the Packers when they had Aaron Jones, if you look at the Vikings, all of these teams when they run outside zone, it's predominantly it's predominantly under center. Like they're going to start under center and then they'll complement that with boots and all these different things that complement the pass game a lot more than say an outside zone RPO. You're muted, by the way.
Sorry, kiddos, and they had the Mario Brothers movie turned up a little loud. I didn't want y'all to hear it. Yeah, no, it makes a lot of sense. Absolutely. When you talk about the edge player and his path to the football or what he's trying to do there, it changes dramatically whether you're allowed to, or you're snapping the ball from under center, or if you are indeed in gun. And yeah, there's a big issue with Texas last year. And you talk about many of the issues that we had in the run game. You mentioned being very diverse. Okay. And that can come with good and bad. Was that more of a case of, and we'll get more into under center, but just a quick question before I forget it. Is that more of a Texas trying to be multiple or Texas trying to find something, anything that particular group could do well?
I think it's a little bit of both. I really do think that Sarkisian is an NFL coach in that way where you watch the NFL, that's the biggest difference. If you look at college offenses to NFL offenses, NFL offenses are just way more diverse in the run game. And when you're really diverse in the run game, you put a lot more stress on the linebackers.
Mm-hmm.
If you're only going to run inside zone 30 times a game, well, linebackers now throughout the week of prep from Sunday to Friday and really Monday to Friday, your linebackers can work on one set. They can just work on fitting inside zone. It's not as you don't have to work through as many things. Whereas if you have a team that runs inside zone, outside zone, counter, duo, trap, veer, some triple option, you name it. Now, those all require fundamentally different run fit mechanics as a linebacker. One of them is working laterally to work double teams off of defensive linemen. The other is trying to play a little bit faster to cut the play off. Another one's got some spill and overlap mechanics where you're taking on pullers and you're playing really fast. Another one, you're going to box and you're going to try to force the ball back inside. You're going to, on pullers, you're going to hit them outside. So these like mechanics that change up how you fit the run. You can see how when you want to be diverse, you now put more stress on your linebackers because it forces them to actually key the runs properly. Because if you think it's inside zone, but it's counter, well, now you're late to meet a puller. That puller is now able to cut you off, and now a gap's opened up for running back to hit. So the idea behind Sarkisian being so diverse in the run game, yeah, it's probably some of we need to figure out what we do well. But to me, it's just as much of you put a lot of pressure on linebackers when you do that because you just put a lot on their plate. And you can do the same thing even from the defensive line perspective where defensive line are taught to read blocks too. Because there are certain times when you're in a 4-down front, if you're a nose tackle and you see a down block towards you, you're taught to cross face.
Yep.
So now if you don't know specifically what you're getting, now there's a little bit of a hesitancy, and maybe where you were supposed to cross face, you didn't. Now there's a gap opened up and a running back can cut off that gap. So you just create a lot more conflict. You create a lot more hesitancy. So that's why you do want to have some diversity in the run game. But then I do think to some extent there was just a we don't know what we do well.
Yep.
Because early in the year, Texas had a lot of success with counter and inside zone against Ohio State. If you look at what they did from a counter perspective, I think they had almost 5 yards per carry. Inside zone wasn't too bad. Duo wasn't so bad. And so early in the year, you think, okay, we're going to be a little bit more power run game based, where maybe you don't need to be as specific into being under center and running outside zone. Well, then by Sam Houston, you realize you can't actually run inside zone very well.
Right.
So then the next week you play Florida and you learn that you can't run anything well. And then you go to Oklahoma and you learn, okay, we can run outside zone decently well. And then Kentucky, you can't run the ball. So at that point, like there is a little bit of, we just have to do something and try to hope that it works. And eventually towards the later stages of the year, I do think you saw Texas get a little bit more into outside zone, but I don't think it was to the full expansion of what it should have been.
No, that's a great point, man, right there. It did look better middle of the season as far as talking about the outside zone. They seem to, as a team the last 2 years, be a little bit better with that concept than they have. What seemed to be the bread and butter under Sark before these last 2 seasons, the inside zone and the duo concepts. Is that, in your opinion, mainly due to maybe a lack of physicality on the interior of the offensive line? Is it the way that the game is changing? But why was we seeing Texas run more and be more successful with outside zone the last couple of years?
I do think it starts with a lack of physicality. Inside zone and duo, they are interior gap runs. Right inside zone, the running back is aiming for the inside hip of the tackle most of the time. That means he's aiming to hit the B gap. On duo, it's an A gap run. You're trying to get right off of that first double team's ass, and you're trying to work upfield immediately. Both of those are all about creating push, resetting the line of scrimmage. They're kind of in a lot of ways what you would consider dirty yards, where you're trying to push a pile, and it's about being stronger than the guy in front of you. It's why guys like, if you watch Mario Cristobal, he's notoriously known for, we want to be the more physical team, and that's kind of what he prides his offensive lines on being. You go watch them, they only run inside zone and duo. So in the most, even Georgia prides themselves on being super physical. Their main run plays, when we're talking about zone stuff and off of without pullers, it's duo and inside zone. So if you're going to run duo and inside zone, you got to be really, really good on the interior. You got to be able to create good push. You got to be able to reset the line of scrimmage. And quite frankly, Texas has been pretty putrid at that the last 2 years. And then also you've got really athletic tackles. Kelvin Banks and Cam Williams in 2024, and then Trevor Gooseby and Brandon Baker in last year. You trust those guys in space a little bit more. So running outside zone kind of naturally appeals there, because if you can run behind Trevor Gooseby and put him out in space where he can take on a nickel or a corner or a safety or a linebacker, you tend to like that matchup.
Right. Yeah. I mean, hard to complain about tackle play in the last 2 seasons. It's all more so fixated on the interior when you talk about the struggles and what has kind of maybe held this offense back a little bit. As far as you going, I'm sure we all have, but Pack especially, we've taken a look at what this roster is going to look like as far as we know it in 2026. We've all envisioned, what we try to do offensively, what we might be successful at, maybe what we needed to ditch from a year ago. So personnel wise, we're in a group chat together, and like you said, you go on a little bit of a rant every now and then, and it's always a very productive rant. You can learn a lot from Pack when he gets that way. But you've talked a little bit about under center and Texas needing to do more of it. Is outside zone, is wide zone, are those the key concepts that you think Texas will again be better at than maybe their inside zone and duo? And then what exactly, or in your ideal world, what does it look like for Texas? Is this out of an ace formation? Would you like a H back playing, with Jordan Washington sliding to the backfield and not playing your traditional fullback role, but being your sniffer type guy? Like, what are you looking at that?
Yeah, so from a personnel standpoint, I think
Said
I,
Jordan Washington, Nick Townsend. Y'all know what I mean. I am so sorry, guys.
um ironically, I think having four tackles or like three tackles out on the field makes a lot of sense for something like outside zone because it isn't so much about creating displacement because really the displacement you're trying to create is more horizontal. You're trying to create widened gaps. So you're trying to push everyone one way and push everyone another way to create a really big alley. That's not necessarily the same for inside zone where it's trying to create vertical displacement. So if you have guys that are really good in space and who know how to use their hands, they're a little bit more technical. Outside zone makes a lot of sense for them. So to me, I think being outside zone heavy next year for a guy like Brandon Baker at guard, I think makes a lot of sense. I think that's going to be a really big strength for him, just because of how good he is in space. Now he may not be the strongest guy on the inside. But if you're not going to run inside zone a ton, it doesn't really matter a whole lot because when you're running outside zone, you're not asking Brandon Baker to move a 300-pound three tech 5 yards deep into the field of play. You're asking him to move him 2 yards to his left or 2 yards to his right to create a gap for your running back. Like that's not Brandon Baker can do that. It's fairly similar to like that's not a hard ask to do. In like the worst case, you're asking him to just hold someone at the point of attack because you're going to trust that Connor Robertson, Seymour, Gooseby, or Siani is going to create enough of a gap in those other areas. So to me, I think if you've got really athletic guys, outside zone makes all of the sense in the world. So to me, that would be the bread and butter for Texas next year. Is you start with your staple being outside zone, and then whatever the other run game is, it should be a good complement. You probably do want something that hits the interior gaps. So think duo. That's a little bit more gap scheme. So you can rep that as your primary gap scheme, and then when you can, you do want to run some counter, some power, something to get pullers involved because those tend to be a little bit better of perimeter runs, and they're a good change up from something like outside zone where everything for a linebacker when you run zone is fairly clean in front of them. Like there's not a bunch of things going on in their vision. Now you can change that up by running motion and whatnot, but that's not gonna unless it's a sniffer or a Y that's motioning back. You're not really changing the eyes of linebackers.
Hmm.
Most of the time, you're changing the eyes of DBs because some teams will rock and roll versus motion. Other teams will travel with motion. Other teams will slide with motion, but unless you're sliding, you really don't have any real concerns with motion from a run game perspective with linebackers if it's not the tight end. So having something to change linebackers' eyes and force them to think a little bit more is really important, and that's where counter power comes in. And then from a formational perspective, to me, outside of it being under center, I do think this is one of those times where you probably do want to be in 12 personnel. I think I think it makes a lot of sense to be in 12 with Mascunas. I hope I said that right. And Townsend as your two tight ends. You can do some stuff where you put them on the same side and you run it to the closed side, which is the side of the two tight ends. You can have them both be on the ball and get into like dot formations where like you're an ace dot. So
Hmm.
you've got both of the tight ends on the ball, arch under center, and then a running back behind it. And then you're balanced. So you've got a wide receiver to both sides. That's not a bad idea. So you can be pretty diverse in terms of what you're doing from an under center perspective. At that point, there is a little bit of complexity you can add in terms of we're going to run a lot of formations out of 12, and we're going to be able to really run the ball running outside zone out of 12. Where I don't think even when Texas was in 12 the last 2 years, I just didn't think they were very good at tight end in terms of blocker, in terms of block disruption, in terms of creating displacement for them to actually be in 12. And you and I talked about this I think before or after the Florida game where Texas had to get out of 12, it felt like, because teams would play, Florida exclusively played nickel against Texas's 12 personnel, and Texas really, really struggled because they could not run the ball against nickel. And if you can't run the ball against nickel out of 12, you just got to say screw it and get into 11 personnel and just play a spread. But
Yep.
now, if you've got two tight ends, and I do think Nick Townsend's a good blocker. I do really like Mascunas as a blocker. So I think out of 12 now, that is a group that you can trust to run the ball. And then when your receivers are Ryan Wingo and Cam Coleman, you're still going to be pretty good in the pass game.
Yeah, that's a good point. And this should be the best blocking tandem of tight ends, that Texas has had, and
Yeah.
maybe in Sark's tenure. I definitely feel comfortable saying that between Townsend and Masunas. Like, that's why we brought Masunas in my opinion, be more of an inline blocker. We didn't get him to go, leak deep into secondaries. And again, he'll still be, somewhat, I would hope, somewhat of a factor in the passing game. Because like you said, Cam Coleman and Ryan Wingo are going to still draw a lot of attention. And if you're successful at all running outside zone or wide zone, then that's just, it's going to be easier for those guys to get looks, especially these tight ends who are at times going to be forgotten about. At the same time, going to need Townsend to take a jump, as far as learning the route tree and just the nuances of how to get out into his routes, and probably has a few things technique wise to clean up as a blocker. This is still a really, really young player, though, with a very, very high ceiling, obviously. Guys, we're going to take a quick break and hear from Andre the Lawyer, and we'll be right back to continue talking some run game and Texas offense.
Texans know when you're injured, there's one name that gets results: Andre the Lawyer. Trust the team that has secured millions for their clients and helped thousands of Texans win their injury cases. Car wrecks, slip and falls, 18-wheeler accidents, on-the-job injuries, wrongful deaths. Don't let the insurance companies tell you what your claim is worth. Andre the Lawyer will fight for you. His principal office is in Dallas, but they serve Texans throughout the state. So don't wait. Call 214-444-8808. That's 214-444-8808. Contact info is in the description.
Pack, you need a lawyer?
I hope not.
Man, keep your nose clean, buddy. All right. No, I'm just kidding. Andre's waiting if you get desperate. All right. Josh, I'll be watching Traders the second this show ends. You can believe that.
What
brother.
is Traders?
It's fantastic. It's a 23 people contestants get placed in a castle. And they have basically 3 of them are named traders. The others are all named faithfuls. And then it's just basically a game of Clue. You're trying to weed out the traders before the end of the game. Multiple faithfuls can win. If a trader is involved in the last group, you just go watch it, man. You'll love it. And I know some of you out there.
It sounds like Survivor and like Among Us a little bit. If like
I haven't watched any of either, but yeah, I've heard the premise of both, and yeah, it's a similar concept. Again, it's fantastic. It's the only reality TV I've ever watched. It gets spicy, man. It's good stuff. And Ansel, we'll get to your question here in just a bit as we get more into talking about the passing game a little bit. He had a question about wide receiver rotation in week one. And then following that with the Ohio State coming to town, and we'll touch on that as well. So I haven't forgotten about you, brother. But I did have to tell Josh not to ruin Traders for me, because he's totally the guy that would come and ruin it in chat just out of spite. I know how you roll, Joshy. But all right, Pack. So let's talk a little bit about, theoretically, if you're able to run outside zone, you're able to run wide zone. Does that make running duo? Does that make running some of the counter or the counter and gap scheme stuff a little bit easier for Texas just by default?
Yeah, if you're able to from under center, I think you can really, really run counter well. I think so. One of the things about if you're going to do that, though, you do need to. There's going to be a little bit of a tell there, but especially if you face a team that runs mint and you can set your weak side to the side of the sniffer or to the off ball tight end. What you can do is to the opposite side. Unless a team brings down a linebacker, you're going to have that 3-man surface be blocked by a 0 tech nose and a 4 eye.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're going to have that C and D gap be wide open. And so you can immediately work your front side linebacker up to the front side linebacker. You get a puller, and then you can pull the tight end. And now you've got great numbers on the front side Tennessee actually did this to Georgia quite a bit in the first matchup in September. And they had a lot of success running counter. They had like a 40-yard run based off of this premise. So, and they didn't do it out of center, but I think any run to me is better out of center because the path's a little bit nicer for the back. You get them working on a head of steam, whereas with shotgun, it's 1-2 steps, you get the ball. You don't, it's not the same. Whereas under center, it's at least 3 steps. And by the time they get the ball, blocks are starting to happen. So it's not as, it's a little bit faster for them. They can see what's going on a little bit quicker. It's not as read and react because by the time they get the ball, you can start to see where blocks are going. You can start to see what path is going to open up and what hole you need to hit. So for running backs, it's a lot easier. For counter in particular, especially against these odd front teams, I think it's great. Even from a 4-down perspective, the path is really nice for backs. And you can do some really good stuff in terms of play action off a counter too, in terms of using some power pass stuff or getting into some different forms of slide protection and then throwing your deep shots. But yeah, I think being under center helps a lot with pretty much every run game outside of maybe even like duo. I think you see a lot in the NFL out of under center. I'm not sure that there's really a run game I don't like out of under center, except for maybe if you're going to run some form of triple option stuff and you're trying to do it and you're trying to like motion someone, then it can get kind of hairy. But Texas doesn't run triple option, so that's not really a thing.
It could be fun.
It could be. I mean, I don't think it'd be the worst idea to have the 3 be Ryan Wingo, Raleek Brown, or Hollywood Smothers, and then you have Arch as your third option. I mean, I wouldn't be totally opposed to that for sure.
Well, I mean, we're having fun here for a minute. What type of would you want Texas to do this out of pistol? Like, what would you want Texas to line up? If, hypothetically speaking, you ever saw Texas run triple option? How's that look in your eyes?
Okay, so Arch is being under center. You've got we'll put Raleek behind him, and then we'll put Ryan Wingo on late motion. So on the snap, Arch is going to really, this is going to be a little awkward, to be honest with you. If we're going to have fun with this, and I'm going to come up with something kind of stupid. So he's going to take 3 steps back and more like 45-degree steps. And he's going to fake, and he's then going to toss it to Raleek. Because then what you're going to have happen is Wingo's going to be on the motion. So now Raleek's got an option to toss it to Wingo on the motion, or he can give a little bubble pass to Arch. So you get a little bit of everything there, or Arch is because he has good hands and he's really good in the open space. Why not give him the opportunity to be a running back, mix it up.
Some would say he was our best one in 2025. Yeah, fair, more than fair. You know what? Line up in true shotgun form. 21 personnel with Ryan Wingo and either back. Now, to do this and to be successful, you're going to have some packages where Ryan Wingo gets out into the route tree from the backfield, and I think you could do some really fun things there. But if we're going to run some wide zone, just line up and run wide zone with one back across, and then run the option going back the other way. Wingo's almost always obviously going to be that pitch guy. So it's a little bit of a tell. So we'll have to work on it. But again, we're just spitballing here off the top of our heads. So it could be fun. I ran a little bit of that stuff in the flag football. So a flag football.
Yeah, another one that you can do is, and this is really common, but if you've got that off-ball tight end, right, and you've got the on-ball tight end away from him, you can run it towards the closed side. So when I say the closed, I mean the side with the on-ball tight end. Mm-hmm. And then you can run split zone, basically, where the tight end's going opposite. And what you do then is you create pseudo flood action. I don't know that Texas was in under center on this specific play, but if you remember the first play of the game against Ohio State, so the first game of the season, where Arch spiked a ball that should have been a 20-yard completion to DeAndre Moore, they did this exact thing where they ran split zone action, and then they did it with Ryan Wingo actually, but you got someone in the flat, you got a deep out behind it, and then you got the go route as the third route there. And they ran boot action behind it. So what you ended up having happen was off of the backside of outside zone, you've now created your boot action, and because of the way outside zone works, where everything's faster and everything works so laterally, your linebackers create such displacement where one of the linebackers may have a coverage responsibility with that Y that swipes back, but because the ball is moving so far to one side, like we'll say it's moving so far to my right, so it's moving from here to here. This linebacker now, his eyes are right here. The tight end sneaks back across, and he ends up being in acres of space. And this is something you see a lot. If you watched Ohio State last year, they did this a lot to Indiana, where it felt like in the second half, almost exclusively, they were just hitting flat routes off of boot action, off of nakeds. And so you can take some of the stuff that Ohio State does and you can see why it works and then just do it yourself. And I think it makes your life really easy because one, you're able to throw it in the flat for 6 yards, and Arch is really good throwing on the move. I think it gets him into a good rhythm. So when you're able to do both of those things at the same time, I think you in general really, really significantly increase your odds of Arch playing well through an entire game and him playing well early. Because even against teams like A&M, he did not start very hot. Same thing with Oklahoma. It was a really slow buildup in both of those games. And some of that is attributed to not a lot of easy throws. And this would absolutely give you that.
You should have had an easy throw there against Ohio State. That was, I mean, we talked on my channel like 2 days before kickoff, and we're just spent 20 minutes like, what will Sark do with the first play of the game? Like, he's really, really good in these big environments, these big moments, these big matchups, and being very, very productive on the first play, whether it's running a quads look and throwing a screen pass to freshman Cedric Baxter in Tuscaloosa. You've seen a wide array of things. Obviously a lot of success in the screen game there for Sark over the years as well. So, but no. I mean, I'm all for it. What kind of passing concepts would you personally like to see? Say we did run successfully some wide outside zone, which helped us run some of our counter schemes better as well. Now, as far as passing concepts, route concepts, what are some things that you can see Texas doing in 2026 out of under center?
Yeah, so I think the primary one is you're going to run a lot more play action, and I like play action a lot more from under center. I think it just functions a whole lot better because of the way that linebackers have to react to it. When you're in shotgun, one, it's just not as fast. Like, linebackers can be a bit more patient where you're under center, you're in shotgun, it's here to here, and then it's back. Or it's here to here, you turn, and that's about it. When you're under center, that's a full 3 steps. So linebackers have to make a full read now. They've got, because if it's run and it's, say they're showing duo under center and you're not immediately fitting it as a linebacker, you're going to give up 20 yards. Like, you're going to get gashed. If it's outside zone and they're showing under center and they're showing run and you're not immediately trying as the front side linebacker to cut the ball off, well, then now you've created a gap and you're going to get gashed. So you've got to speed up your fit a little bit when you're under center. And this is something you'll hear a lot of college coaches talk about when they're talking about under center, especially defensive ones, is how their fits speed up. The linebackers become what's known as hot, so they have to make decisions a little bit faster. So you do that, and then what ends up happening is now Texas loves to run deep overs. You see that all the time. You see a lot of people talk about this. And so now there's a lot of space behind. There's now a lot of space in the middle part of the field to run those deep overs, where now those windows aren't as cloudy. Whereas initially, when you have these linebackers that are able to be a bit more patient, those windows can be somewhat cloudy. You have to throw with more touch, a little bit more anticipation.
Yep.
It's not as much of a gimme. Well, now under center, it is a gimme. So you can run the deep overs, you can run the wave and spear concepts that Sarkisian loves, where wave is 2 deep overs. The spear concept is 2 deep overs on one side and then a deep over on the other side. So think like double post with a deep over on the opposite side. So you're able to do a lot of different stuff with crossing routes and all of that stuff off of play action, which Texas really wants to do. That's a major staple of the offense for Sarkisian. So it's kind of one of the things that Texas has to do, because if they can't run play action, they can't run those. They don't have a lot of things that they can run at that point, because they really haven't run a whole lot of quick game recently. Now, if you're going to play under center, you naturally have to run more under center because you're not going to be able to run RPOs from under center, which is a good thing because RPOs suck. But you so you get your offense is going to be more complex under center is basically the premise.
Yeah, man, some old souls are listening to this episode right now, Pack, and they're getting chills and goosebumps. We talked about giving the ball to running backs maybe a little bit deeper. It's not 7 yards deep like in old school I formations and stuff you'd see like that. All of a sudden, I just got nightmares about Peterson lining up back there with a head full of steam. Still grateful we went 2-1 against that guy. Injuries be damned, but yeah. And then now we talk triple option. Now we're talking more, some waggle, some boot action, slide protection, from under center. I mean hey, it's kind of funny how cyclical it all is, concepts and schemes and how they've slowly, some older ideas have kind of worked their way back into modern football. And that's what's fun about it, man, because all these things, they all worked over time. And again, you got to keep, like you said, you have to make, in my opinion, you got to have defenses preparing for a ton of stuff. Some of these guys are so well versed in modern day offenses and the RPO game, as you mentioned. And so continuing to throw wrinkles at them, continuing to create hesitancy, making linebackers, safeties, everybody in general, just play a little bit slower, coach a little bit slower. Man, in an ideal world, yeah, running the football. We're getting trolled back by Lindell. Awesome. Going and graduating, I'll say I can't say the same for myself.
I go to UT, so
yeah, that's what's fun. He never said graduated, which that's where I would be hurt. But as far as going, hey, we share that there. But thanks for watching either way, Lindell. Appreciate you being here, man. But yeah, so it's a little bit of old school football, man. And obviously, in an ideal world, you're able to go out there and run whatever concept that you can. Hasn't really been the case for Texas in the running game the last couple of years, and which Pat just mentioned, by default, is going to hurt you in the passing game because if you're running nickel against 12 personnel like Florida did in Gainesville, I mean, for one, that's a direct insult, borderline slap across your face of your football program, just a little bit. And for two, it's going to make things a lot more difficult. We're going to hear a quick word from Dave McClellan, and we'll be back here for the last 20 or so minutes of the show.
Big financial decisions don't have to feel overwhelming. There's someone who can guide you every step of the way. David McClellan is a fiduciary financial advisor with Forum Financial, and he's working closely with his clients as a true financial life coach, guiding every aspect of your financial journey with expertise and care. If his name sounds familiar, that's because David was a swimmer at Texas and a member of several national championship teams. Today, he channels that same championship mindset into helping people win with their finances. David specializes in financial planning, and he's contributed numerous articles to Kiplinger on the topic of retirement tax bombs. And right now, David is offering viewers a free intro consultation to assess your financial situation. Do not miss this chance to get personalized guidance from a trusted expert. To schedule your free consult, email David at dmcclellan@forumfinancial.com, or you can call him directly at 312-933-8823. The contact info is in the description.
All right, Pac, before we move on to Ansel's question that he had before the show even started, I want to ask you, if Texas does run a lot of under center, if they are successful, wide zone, outside zone, which back do you see being really maybe fits that concept a little bit better, if there is a back in your mind that fits it better? And who do you think is more successful in that concept?
I actually think both of them are going to be really good with it. I think Smothers just because of his vision and his contact balance. And then I think if you give Brown the opportunity to get in space, I think you can create a lot of different, you just like that matchup. If you put him in space with one-on-one with DBs or one-on-one with linebackers, you like your odds for him to make someone miss and then turn a 5-yard play into a 20-yard play. So for that reason, I'm not going to say one of them. I'd say both. I think this is kind of one of those times where, to me, I think both of the first two running backs are going to have a lot of success with it. Maybe someone like Derek Cooper, it's not as natural of a fit in terms of what his run game, in terms of what he's most comfortable with from a run game perspective. If you watch him from his Chaminade Madonna highlights or his huddle, you don't necessarily see a whole lot of outside zone on his huddle. You see a lot of inside zone. You'll every once in a while see a puller, so you may see some counter, but that's really about it. And so it's maybe not as seamless of a fit for him, but it's a really good fit for Smothers and Brown. And you can even do some really cool stuff in terms of with Relique Brown, some wheel action off of outside zone where you once again you run play action, then you leak him out on a wheel route. Think what Jaden Blue did against Ohio State. You can do some stuff like that too.
Yeah, that's another thing. I think, not that Texas is out trying to find exactly a Jaden Blue clone, but you really do like what he could do off the edge of a defense, especially against some of these better teams. I mean, the only two times I got in the end zone in the Cotton Bowl were, just basically Jaden Blue just outrunning guys to the flats and then outrunning guys to the end zone. You can do a lot with speed, man. Speed really does kill. Now, do you think an improved passing, especially an improved downfield passing attack with obviously a Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo, Emmett Mosley, is that going to help these backs out a little bit and this potentially this offensive line as well?
I think it helps a little. I don't think it helps a lot. Because like what it'll do if teams really, really are scared of Wingo and Coleman is they'll play a lot more 2 high or even 3 high. So you get some lighter boxes. But to me, none of that, even in the normal scenario, you're probably going to originally start with light boxes. And so I'm not so sure that just playing, like if you were to play shotgun, I'm not so sure that you love the matchup from a light box because if you're playing like 11 personnel and you're playing 4 open and the team is playing mid, well, they're still going to be able to handle outside zone from a light box.
Sure.
So it's not as big of a concern so much as I think what it does do is it forces team into light boxes, and that's a pro. But like the Seahawks showed last Sunday, you can have light boxes if you've got really good defensive linemen and you know how to fit the run, and you know what you're going to get. Like there's a recent clip that came out today of Ernest Jones, the Mac or Mike backer for Seattle. He's calling out what the Patriots are running on every play. So if you know what's coming, if you know what run game you're seeing, you can run a light box. It doesn't matter. So it has to be a little bit more than that, where you've got to be able to punish light boxes. And I think you're better able to punish light boxes running outside zone from under center, or you just need to be the more physical team and impose on people.
No, I agree with you, man. Again, I think, definitely being able to push the ball downfield will help a little bit, but a lot of these teams are going to defend Texas and with the light box and say, prove that we need to put more guys around the line of scrimmage, put more people down into the box before we get out of that. You know what I mean? We'll try to limit your explosives over the top if you're not killing us with your ground game whatsoever. And I think you saw that at times over the past couple of years, you know what I mean? And that's where you'll see some of our struggles at times because, again, Sark's still going to take his shots. Arch is still going to force the ball down the field. And, again, running the football, man, it makes everybody a little bit happier. It makes everything a little bit easier. So hopefully we see a Texas running game that is somewhat back to the standard that it's been, for so many years. Ansel, it's your time, brother. All right, we got some great news about Cam Coleman learning that playbook fast and with this offense. Very true. It's a great point. Great news. How will the wide receiver rotation look? And what adjustments could Sark make coming into week 1 again? Well, I think you meet week 1 and then Ohio State. So Texas State comes to DKR first. Are you expecting Sark to maybe go a little bit deeper into this wide receiver rotation early in the year? I mean, you got a really basically a must-win game in week 2 there with Ohio State. So do you think he goes with the guys that, that he knows exactly what to expect between a Ryan Wingo, Emmett Mosley, and obviously a Cam Coleman? Or do we see a little bit of a Khalil Lockett? Do we see a little bit of a Day-Day McCutcheon? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think it's going to be fairly limited. I do think you're going to see some McCutcheon and some Lockett and some Bishop in spurts, like maybe for a play in like a 10-play drive where Mosley needs a breather or Wingo needs a breather or Coleman needs a breather. But generally, I don't think it's going to be one of those things where you're seeing a snap distribution that's fairly even. I do think by the end of week 1, it's going to look fairly even because those guys are going to get to play a lot in the second half when Texas is up 56-3 or whatever they're up. So you're going to have an opportunity to play those young guys, but especially versus Ohio State, I think it's going to be pretty tight. Like I do think at most you're going to see some McCutcheon snaps and you'll see some Lockett snaps, but that's going to be about it. It's going to be fairly limited in terms of the wide receiver rotation, because like you said, it is effectively a must-win game because you do have a really tough schedule in the SEC, and you think maybe one loss is feasible, but two losses isn't super hard to see, especially if Tennessee does get Joey Aguilar to have eligibility. They all of a sudden become a really good team. So it's kind of easy to see two losses on the schedule for Texas outside Ohio State. So that turns into a must win. And so it has to be all hands on deck. You just got to play your best guys.
Yeah, no, I fully agree with you, man. Especially when you talk about finishing the season with 8 straight conference games. I've made that comment a million times on here. That's not me being a coward. I'm not scared of it. It's going to be tough. It is what it is because you've got Oklahoma in that stretch, and you turn around with Florida. You turn around, you've got Ole Miss. You know what I mean? Like, obviously the news with Trinidad Chambliss, who, in my opinion, I think that's basically a done deal that he'll be a Rebel next year and part of that offense. And you talk about three out of 4 to finish the season on the road with road trips to Baton Rouge, College Station in there. And then you have a weird one with Missouri. You have Arkansas as well, of course, again, for the second straight year coming to DKR. I'm sure those guys are pretty pissed about that, I can imagine. They might be numb to all feeling up there in Fayetteville at the moment, though, with how things have gone as of late. But yeah, so, I mean, it is a must-win game. I could see the situation, same as you just said, Pac, where you're doing basically what you want on offense against the Texas State defense that struggled mightily the last year. Has a new DC coming in. They'll be working on new things. They'll probably get better as the season goes, but it's not going to be at DKR and not against Texas. And so you might see, some Khalil Lockett highlights. You might get some Jermaine Bishop, Dede McCutcheon, who had to be on the field a little bit last year in Columbus. Not a little bit. He was on the field a decent amount, more than we probably thought he would be in that opener when we went up to Columbus. But yeah, by week 2, probably a little bit tighter where, if you see Khalil Lockett, it could be just because, hey, dude took a weird fall, just needs a playoff. You know how football goes. If you see a Dede McCutcheon, would you like to see any particular package for Jermaine Bishop early in the season? There's a part of me that wants to just show a couple of the Jermaine wrinkles against Texas State, and then maybe use those as somewhat of decoys when you go and have Ohio State come to town, and then you go to Knoxville and Neyland Stadium a couple weeks later. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he might be the best player with the ball in his hands on Texas's roster right now, which is really high praise because Texas has a lot of guys that are really good with the ball in their hand. But I think Bishop's explosiveness, his speed, his stop and start, his ability to decelerate and then accelerate, he's got really good fluidity in terms of his hips and his knees. So he's able to get in and out of breaks really quick. He's able to change direction really quick. He does a really good job of sinking into his hips, which means he's able to change direction with really good tempo. So you say all that to say, I think you want the ball in his hands as much as you possibly can. Now, to me, I think a lot of it should be like gadget stuff where you're getting to pseudo 12 personnel and you're running him in rocket motion stuff, or you're running him on bolt motion to get him a screen pass, or you're doing some stuff where you're using cheat motions, get him on a slant, just little things to get the ball in his hands. In terms of showing it versus Texas State and then using it as a decoy against Ohio State, I think you can do it against Texas State just to force Ohio State to prep for one more thing, because you do want the more things that Ohio State has to prep for, the better you feel about what you're going to be able to do, because it's the old thing that we've been talking about all day. The more spread you are, the harder it is to be great at one thing. That's why you see a lot of really good defenses right now. They primarily major in one or two things. They're not doing everything under the sun, because once you start to do everything, it's not the NFL where you have all day to practice.
Right.
You've got time constraints. You got kids that still somewhat go to online class. So it's not as, you don't have all day to make sure guys understand what they're doing. So the more you can put on a kid's plate, the better, just in general. That's kind of how it is everywhere. I think I talked about it with you guys on a show. The ultimate win for a defensive coordinator is forcing the quarterback to have to read the field beyond their first read. Make them play quarterback. It's the same thing. You want to make guys play throughout the entire down. You want to make them really think. You want to test their processing skills. When you do that, good things tend to happen. So the more things you force them to prep for, the more processing that has to go on. Long story short, I don't know that I would be open to doing some decoy stuff, or just saying we're going to give the ball against Ohio State because he's the most electric player on the field, and we want an ability to create explosives.
Yeah, that's the thing. If he's out there making explosive plays, you'd almost feel, borderline idiotic to just use him as a decoy. You know what I mean? Especially in big moments, like let's see exactly what he's about, what he can do with the ball against, some of the most elite talent out there. And speaking about progressing past the first read, hey, you can make a quarterback do that, and then next thing you know, that quarterback loses at DKR, loses at home to Miami, and doesn't throw a single touchdown pass in either game, and looks far from the player that he was early in the season. So I think that's kind of what you're referencing. And again, everything can change really, really quick. You've seen, Baylor with RG3 and Bryce Petty and some really, really good offenses that tore it up statistically. That's a very, very easy offense to teach, a very, very easy offense to learn and to execute. But once you start putting them off their first read right there, that's when a Browse offense, a Baylor offense will start to break down a little bit against some of the better competition they faced. And again, you've seen multiple iterations of that throughout, because a lot of these college quarterbacks, the scheme is just so nice for them, man. And the single read a lot of times is there. But like you just said, it's a major, major win if you can take that first read away and make them look past that a little bit. Pac, we're running low on time here. Is there anything in particular that you wanted to bring up that maybe we hadn't gotten to yet?
Yeah, so I mentioned RPOs suck, and I'm going to talk about that now from an outside zone perspective. So one of the things you have to understand about RPOs is a lot of the time they're designed to read overhangs, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if you're running, we'll say bubble, because this is the most basic example, where it's 2x2, the slot is running a bubble screen, the X or the outside most receiver to the side of the slot, he's blocking, right? So what you're doing as a quarterback is you're reading the overhang to the side of the back, because you want to see if they step towards the line of scrimmage, if they get involved in the run game, you're going to throw it out on the bubble. If they stay hanging out on the RPO, if they move with the bubble, you want to run it, because now you got better numbers in the box. Well, the problem with outside zone is those overhangs are allowed to be so patient, because when you run it from shotgun, like we've been saying, it doesn't hit as fast. So they don't have to be as decisive. They can hang a little bit more. And so now you don't actually remove them from the run game, where they're able to pop their feet, stay stagnant, force you to hand the ball off, and now they join the run. So now you didn't actually remove anyone from the fit. Whereas if you're under center, once again, you don't know immediately, because everything looks like run. You're getting run blocking. And so now if you are going to be – now you can't run RPOs, but what you can do is you can run quick game. And I talked about last Saturday about Min4 Mod. And I think on that show, and if I didn't say that then, I'll say it now, Min4 Mod is an exclusively run and RPO-based concept. If you're getting quick game like snag 7 flat, where you're getting two slants from the 1 and the 2 receiver and the 3 is running a corner route, Min4 Mod sucks against that. Like, it's just not a good coverage for stuff like that. It's not designed for true pass game concepts. It's almost exclusively designed to force teams to run the ball, yep, and then gain guys in the fit. Well, when you run actual pass game concepts against a coverage that's not exactly designed for passing, you tend to have good things happen. And so for teams that run quarters, now they have to get into more light fit box mechanics, and they have to run stuff like switch or bracket. So now you can run the ball a bit easier, because now they're having to game up the front. Or if they're going to play single high, well, now you feel pretty good about the quick game options. And a lot of the time, then you can get into the under center stuff with the play action, with the deep overs and whatnot. So if you start from quick game, and what I mean by quick game is think 3-step drop, receivers running a slant, another receiver is running shallow. So think a lot of guys running yards that are 15 yards or deeper, or routes that can be run within like 3 seconds. That's kind of the idea here. So if you're able to run quick game, one, you're able to stress defenses at a lot higher level. So you take them out of concepts they're really comfortable with, like a Min4 Mod, and you force them into concepts that are more 4-down based or more coverage based, and you allow yourself to run the ball a little bit easier because of the light box stuff we're talking about, but also because even with that light box, everyone is in conflict.
And that's what you want to do. You want to create conflict. You want to dictate what the defense is able to call against you. You know what I mean? Same way you're talking about making a quarterback look past your first read. Obviously, if an offense can dictate what the defense is doing, that's a +1 in their box, a big advantage on their end. I honestly didn't know you felt that way about RPO, so it's good to hear a little bit of that. I missed that rant in the group chat. I'll say that, but it's
I
always good
haven't
to.
put it in the group chat yet, but I did tell some people about it. I have not. I'm just not I think RPOs, if you're going to be spread, make a lot of sense. I don't like them from outside zone. I don't think they work very well. I think if you look at Texas's RPO success rate, especially with Arch last year, I don't think it was very high. Now, because like really, when Texas did a really good job with RPOs off outside zone, it was off of deeper concepts. Like they would be running RPO glances, or instead of 3 steps, and as a wide receiver, instead of your third outside step, and then you cut in, it's now off a 5th step. So it's a little bit longer. It's basically doing the same thing as what being under center would from a 3-step drop, where you're forcing everything to hang a little bit longer. The play runs a little bit longer, so people have to make decisions sooner. It's basically the same idea. But if you run the RPO glance stuff, you got to hold up a little bit better. And so the better thing to do is just run quick game.
No, I like it, man. I'm all about quick game. And again, we talked a lot about that through the middle of last season. I thought it kind of, like that was our only hope. And then you saw Texas implement it really, especially on the road in Starkville, not only because they had to. I'm going to give Sark more credit than that, but you definitely had to. They had to get the offense moving a little more up tempo, they couldn't protect Arch. So make some throws that were easier for Arch to get the ball out of his hands quicker. And obviously that helps out the offensive line a little bit as well. But man, it's always fun with Pack on here. His knowledge is at the very top of the totem pole when it comes to this stuff, and it's only growing as he is continuing to just pick it up, man. This guy lives, eats, sleeps, and breathes football. And so a lot of respect, Pack. Thanks for joining us here real quick, guys. We talked last night on the channel about the big matchup tonight between Texas and Vandy on the road in Nashville for the women's team on the hardwood. Didn't go great. Vandy they played smarter. They played harder. They played better than Texas. I think 17-point win in the end. I gave up on it, last couple of minutes because we were getting ready for this show. You got baseball. I know Pack loves him some baseball. This guy, he's a baseball junkie, let me tell you. Sorry, I couldn't resist. UC Davis comes to town. They come to the Dish. You got baseball tomorrow afternoon, Saturday afternoon, Sunday afternoon. So get out there, support the fellas if you can. Should be a pretty dang good team. Me personally, I'll be in Austin on Saturday for that 2:00 matchup, I believe. Luckily, Dodgers got a volleyball tournament, so it was can't pass it up right down the road. But all right, Pack, thank you guys. Thank you for joining, man. Guys, thank y'all for watching. Throw a like on the video if you haven't done so, and don't forget about the $1 new subscription, new member deal over at Inside Texas. We'll see y'all. I'll be back on Sunday. See you then.